Hello and welcome to another Authors Outselling Artistic Outgoing Out Loud Readers While Women Willing to Throw Their Worries to the Wind When They Wind Up Their Hair. Uncle Gary just bought a new peacemaker and is ready to take on the government episode of the Days Grimm. My name is Brian Michael Day.
My name is Thomas Grimm.
What's up, dude?
How's it going?
Dude, fucking sick.
Yeah.
It
sounds like it.
Having a fucking blast today. Just honestly, if rank this day amongst all days, top 5 in like the last 5 years. Pretty dope.
When did you leave the Middle East?
What?
I said, when did you leave the Middle East? How many years?
A long time ago.
Okay, so it doesn't fall in that timeline.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like 10 years. I thought about that the other day. I'm 10 years removed from Afghanistan.
10
Isn't
years
that
sober.
Fucking wild. Yeah, 10 years sober from killing. It's fucking great, dude. Honestly, I haven't killed anything in a long time, so fucking don't push my patience, civil folks out there. I'm really pumped about this week. We've been talking about it for the last month and a half on the show. Thomas, do me a favor. Hit him with that intro, please.
Joining us this week in the Days Grimm studio is New York Times best-selling author. He wrote The Savage, The Ravaged, and Back to the Dirt. Frank Bill, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
You can't leave out crimes in Southern Indiana.
See,
Or Donnybrook.
Donnybrook.
It was turned into a film. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I fucking forgot about that. I should have read Donnie, but I was so pumped on the Back to the Dirt. I just grinded so hard straight through it.
Awesome.
No, loved it, dude.
I think he read it twice.
Yeah. Well, like 1 3/4. 1 3/4. I made it almost all the way. Basically read it. I didn't read like the before and the after stuff the second time, but read the story twice. Phenomenal book, dude.
And what's interesting about
And it came out last week on the 9th. This episode airs on the 16th, so it actually has just recently dropped. Which I didn't know. You put something on our social media about you were actually able to pre-order it, I think.
Well, you can pre-order it, but you can also pre-order the audiobook on Audible.
And who did your audiobook for you?
Last name is Coffee. Can't remember his first name. They sent me 3 different samples of people to read, and I went through and listened to different books that they had done, and I liked his voice the best.
Have they done that for your other books? I noticed it's a different reader for each one.
Yeah.
Damn. So what was the
Balky was the last one.
What was the last one?
Remember Balky?
Balky?
Perfect Strangers.
Perfect Strangers.
Old sitcom.
No.
Balky. He was in True Romance. Remember the...
Am I showing how young I am right now?
Yeah, have you ever seen True Romance?
Mm-mm.
What?
No.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, I have no idea. True
Christian
Romance.
Slater and...
I know that name. Does that make you feel any
Brad
better?
Pitt's in it. You've got to watch. It's one of Quentin Tarantino's scripts, and it was adapted by, gosh, I can't think of the guy who, the director, Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, who passed away.
Oh,
so
rest in
why
peace.
why didn't you choose to read the book for the Audible books?
Was that even an option for you?
Yeah, I just, you don't make any extra money doing it, and it's a lot of
time?
It's pretty tedious. I mean, because you got to get your voice right. You want to get, if you want to do the different voices for characters, dry mouth.
Oh,
Sometimes you're reading perfectly, and next thing you know, you screw something up. Because before I do a reading anywhere, I always pick whatever 5-6 pages I'm going to read, and I will read over those back and forth for an hour.
Oh, sick.
High, low, going over my head, walking around like I'm talking about it, and just trying to get my voice where I want it.
Now, your Southern accent is not inherently awful. I don't think it's any worse than anyone else's I've ever met in this region, like Southern Indiana region. But some of your characters have so I remembered in Disgruntled, which was a short story that you wrote for Playboy.
Playboy, yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal story. About a 15-20 minute read and worth every minute. And we can talk more about it. But the dialogue and some of the characters, like the words that they use, like yorn and stuff like that. Like I don't feel like a lot of people in Southern Indiana use words like that. Or is it different over in Corden?
I think it's more of the rural. When you get into talking to your different farmers, or my grandfather, my step grandfather, which was really the only grandfather I knew, was an avid coon hunter, and that's where I picked up hunting from. I rabbit hunting because I always had beagles, but yeah, I mean, if you listen to him talk, or you listen to him, he would sing at church. He sound like Johnny Cash. I mean,
Really?
that's just the way. Yeah, he was just an old country boy. I mean, you know, that's just the way he spoke.
I do a pretty good Johnny Cash.
And you know, the way that people talk, their dialogue is always clipped. It's never a proper sentence.
Yeah.
It's never "How are you today?" It's always "How are you today?" You know, that
How you
kind
doing?
of thing.
How
or
you doing?
One that he picked up on when he and I first met. I said something about my getting something out of my instead of saying chest of drawers, I said Chester drawers. He said, "You named your fucking drawers?" I said, "That's just, it's just, you know, that, right." But it's the slang of how you spoke. You don't really think about it. You know, you round your words.
Yeah, I'm sure that I'm real bad about it because I grew up in a trailer. I don't know if you're familiar with folks that grew up in a trailer, their English isn't great, or at least mine wasn't for a really long time.
Depends on when you're cooking how bad it gets. I mean,
yeah, so we had like a 1 year spurt, and then we kind of, you know, hung up the cleats or whatever that acronym
The
is.
gloves?
Yeah, hung up the glass bulb. No, we never cooked, but we definitely had some neighbors that for sure were cooking. You know, that was popular in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yep.
Weren't people make in the 90s?
not yet. Yeah, they're doing.
Basically,
Right.
probably still some drink.
I've got a story on that, but I'll tell it later.
Your drug stories are so. Before we're getting wild in this interview. Before we get too crazy, we like to do this small 60-second.
It's like a
pitch.
soft intro of like, who is Frank Bill?
Yeah, like if you were going to introduce yourself to someone who is into books, obviously you're an author. We know that because we're sitting here bragging on your book here, Back to the Dirt, that just released. But if you were going to meet somebody and try to, you know, tell them about who you are in like a rough elevator pitch, what does that elevator pitch sound like? Like who is Frank Bill other than a man with two first names?
I'm a blue collar factory worker who writes books, and I write about what I know and where I come from.
That's short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah.
That was like 18 seconds.
You can tell he's an author.
I used to have a blog, and I used to always the heading said, "My name's Frank Bill. I don't waste words. I write them."
So I have an issue with that. So when I write emails at my work, people think I'm pretentious because I use too many words.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But
They call it literature.
yeah, but I like adjectives. So when I describe something, I want you to be there. You do a really good job of that.
Thank you.
I think
Yeah, painting a picture with words. and
Yeah.
scene.
Well, whenever I write something, I want you to feel it, taste it, and be totally disgusted by it. I want that element, you know, if you're getting your teeth on the curb to be curbed, I want you to feel what that taste, you know, what that's going to, I want that enamel, I want you to feel that chip when it gets, you know, and against your tongue. And
God,
you know.
that's fucking American History X right there.
Yep.
Dark times.
Yep.
But I was going to say, I feel like you do use less words to describe a scene, but the way you do it, you use the right word, but it has like no filter. Like you use a word that most people are uncomfortable with.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It's visceral. Yeah.
Yeah, visceral is a very good adjective that I would use. But yeah, your writing is fucking intense, dude.
Thank you.
I'm not an avid reader. I'm not. I don't claim to be.
Anytime he got a hold of like some new piece of yours, he was burning through it. He's like, man, he was sending me link after link after link, and I'm like, I'm an audio and like visual kind of guy. Like it took me forever to get through the book, but like, so I can't wait for the audio book to come out and like get to actually like sit and listen to it all the way through.
Thank you.
I wonder what the coffee gentleman sounds like too.
You can listen to a sample. It sounds good. I've listened to the first part, and then they actually sent me, it's in I think 10 or 11 pieces, because there was another podcast that wanted the audio only, and you couldn't get them a CD or like an MP3, but you could send them like a code and they could listen to it. So that's who they had to send it to. So
Sick.
Still waiting on them to listen to it. So
Shout out to those guys.
But no, one thing I did want to comment too is like there's not necessarily any chapters. So like
I never have been a chapter guy.
I said that. So are your other books the same way?
Yeah.
Just kind of raw read through,
Right.
And break. Like, do you break them up with like little symbols like you do in Back to the Dirt?
Similar. Like the Savages before, or it's then and now, because it's about a young boy and flashback to him and his father, and then now the future. It's back and forth. You get this so you get to hear his backstory.
Okay, neat. Sorry, I'm just peeking over here at the doll. So normally we have that's what we're recording on today. Normally we have our intern, Drew, who takes care of all the recording and stuff. So I was just peeking over, making sure we're still in good shape, still recording. It's weird to run a show from across the room. So if I'm like in panic mode and I'm leaning, that's why. So making sure we don't fuck this up. Have you watched any of the episodes before by any chance, Frank?
Yep.
So you're familiar with the death of the week?
Yes.
Pretty great. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's kind of the highlight of my job. I enjoy this the most. I meet super dope people that write kick-ass books like Frank Bill. Honestly, that's notch number 2. Notch number 1, death of the week. That's like my favorite thing about this job. So without further ado, can I roll into it? You're looking at me like star-studded, like...
Yeah. This week's Death of the Week brought to you by Thedaysgrimm.com.
Brought to you by Thedaysgrimm.com. Get you some of these sweet mugs sitting over here by Mr. Bill. We've got the T-shirts, we've got beanies, we've got trucker hats, we've got all kinds of cool shit. We got a lot of embroidered stuff. We got front logos, back logos. Get in there, get you something sweet. Corn Dog Development also. He hands out these super sick coasters to us that we use in the studio. Use the promo code Days Grimm, 10% off any of his woodworking stuff in his Etsy store. That link is in the description. Check him out, guys. So, this week's Death of the Week, not far from Corydon, Indiana. We're talking Louisville, Kentucky, folks, or to the layman, Louisville. Investigators with Indiana State Police have released that the name of a man killed in a crash involving 2 semi-tractor trailers near Corydon, Indiana on I-64 Thursday afternoon. It happened just after 4 p.m. Thursday. That's when Harrison County authorities reported a serious crash in the eastbound lanes of I-64 near the 105-mile marker, according to a news release from Indiana State Police. The preliminary investigation indicates a white 2013 Volvo Semi-truck, sometimes I fucking get Parkinson's while I'm reading. So 2013 Volvo Semi-truck pulling a car-hauling trailer was merging into the eastbound lane of I-64 from the Corydon exit at the same time that a red 2014 Volvo Semi-truck, double Volvo situation here, pulling an empty box trailer was approaching the same exit. The red Volvo collided with the rear of the car hauler trailer, hooked to the white Volvo as it was merging onto the slow lane of the interstate. Both vehicles came to rest at the emergency lane on the side of the road. The driver of the red Volvo, 64-year-old, that dude owns a coonskin hat for sure, of Dearborn Heights, Michigan, was critically injured and flown to University of Louisville Hospital, where he died from his injuries. The driver of the white Volvo was not injured, and he also said the red Volvo guy needs to drive better. That's this week's Death of the Week. What do we think, guys?
I think after you hit like maybe 60, you should go and have to retake your driver's test every 2 years.
Well, there's a law there. There is a law there. There's an age. I think it's after you retire. Is it after you retire, or is it when you turn 70 that you have to like re-verify? You do have to do that though. It's like your license expires like way less time then. So you get like 5 years instead of like you and I, we get like a fucking quarter of a century or something. I don't have to re-up mine until like 2056 or something.
Yeah.
I just got it done. So what do you think about that? You a big Volvo guy?
No, I'm a Toyota dude.
Yeah, I don't support the Germans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know where Volvo is even from. Toyota is a hell of a truck. You have a really nice Toyota, by the way.
Thank you.
It's a 4Runner, correct? Or am I just stupid?
Tacoma.
Yeah. I am stupid, for
2013
sure.
Tacoma. Yeah.
That's sharp. That's a nice truck. It definitely puts the Ranger to shame. I used to be a big Ranger fan.
Oh, yeah.
And then they just ruined that truck. Yeah, this last set of Rangers that come out.
When they got those Tacomas now that you can bury to the frame and like press a button and it'll dig itself out.
What?
Yeah.
That's gnarly. Yeah, the TRD, I think that's what they are. Toyota Rally Department. Yeah, the TRDs.
Those are sharp.
Fucking sick, dude. Although the Raptors are pretty fucking... I'm a Ford guy, clearly. Black Mustangs.
I
mine.
looked at the Raptors.
The Raptors are fucking sick.
I like them.
The skid plates that go all the way back to the fucking oil pan.
Mm-hmm.
Like it starts at the fucking radiator and goes back to the oil pan. That's fucking intense. Dude, you could fucking mow over a family of 8 and not even know it. I don't know how that works, but yeah. So that's this week's Death of the Week. I think I'm lesser of a fan of Volvo now. I don't know that I was a big fan before.
German engineering.
Yeah, and I think a friend of ours, Don, sitting off camera right now, he actually suggested we look this Death of the Week up because it happened just recently. the other day, actually, and I think the guy was decapitated or close to decapitated. Pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the Corvettes are really struggling. That Corvette sinkhole situation, and then now semis wrecking. Just losing money left and
What
right.
sinkhole are you talking about?
There was a sinkhole at a Corvette factory, like in the middle of it. Ate up,
Oh, yeah,
like,
that's
a
down in
whole bunch.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Fuck.
Yeah,
And
Bowling Green.
And it's all regional, too. It's like Corvettes in the Midwest just need to chill the fuck out. They are losing some money, dude.
I like the old vets, but I don't really care for the...
I made a joke the other day. We were talking on the pod with who, I can't even remember because we shoot so many, but we were talking with somebody and I was like, if you were a car, what kind of car would you be? And they were like, I think I'd be a something. And then I said, oh, it was Jeremiah Gailey. And I said, I'd be a bright yellow 88 Corvette. That, like Skid Row all the way. You know what I mean? Just like piles of on the dash, just like going wild. That'll probably get beeped. That's another thing. You can say whatever you want. We just take all the offensive shit out, by the way.
Okay.
So this is free reign.
All right.
But anyway, so that's this week's Death of the Week. Let's get away from that. And more on to Frank Bill. So you were born and raised in Corydon, Indiana.
Yep.
What the hell was that like?
Well, you were farm raised too.
Yeah, my grandparents had a farm. Pretty much spent every weekend on that farm, and then through the summer, pretty much every day.
Just agriculture? Or I guess I'm assuming.
Well, my grandfather was a hunter. My grandmother was a home wife, basically, and she babysat kids for extra money. And then my grandfather worked for the town of Corydon. He was he was head of the street department. But he made money selling pelts.
Sick.
Yeah.
So he's done a couple coonskin hats.
And he raised and trained and bred coonhounds.
What do you think the weirdest animal you've ate is?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I've had coon. It tastes like disgusting.
You ever had, like,
they used to
bobcat?
have coon fries all the time. Yeah,
Coon
like
fries?
a barbecue, like a
like a
fry,
fry.
like a grill, like
Oh,
grilling
gotcha.
them. Yeah, the smell is like
Terrible.
Smelled like your neighbor's trash. Probably.
probably a neighbor's asshole.
Ooh,
Yeah,
bro.
It
What's an animal that you want to eat that you've never eaten before? What do you think?
I've always wanted to try bear.
Not had bear? We
Yeah.
actually had bear together.
It's supposed to be really good if they've been eating like, I guess, like berries. They always talk about if they've been into like a blueberry patch or a strawberry patch, something like that, or
ours
wild berries.
I think
maybe.
ours was eating a lot of coyotes or something because
Okay.
it wasn't great.
Didn't care for
No,
it.
it wasn't bad, but it was just really it was greasier than I thought it would be.
I liked it.
Yeah. It was good. It's a deep, dark, red, rich meat.
Right.
You would look at the cut. We had it ground up because we made burgers, but like it was very, very red, almost like venison. And I was like, this is going to be fucking killer. And we threw it on the grill, and you would have thought we were grilling bacon. Like it was just
Really?
flare, just
That's because
grease,
there's so much fat.
huge fat content, which I was.
I like fat.
Yeah, it was delicious though. It was pretty good. It was pretty good.
Cougar's supposed to be good too.
Ooh, some big cat.
Yeah,
I heard that when they're skinned, it looks just like rabbit.
yeah, that's what I heard too.
I've been. You can't kill bobcats in Indiana, but you can in Kentucky. So I'm trying to find somebody in Kentucky when they get one to skin it up.
Really? Would you eat it?
Yeah,
You eat bobcat?
I'll eat anything.
Is there a law? Are there laws? You're a hunter, so are there laws on stuff that you can kill legally but you can't eat? I'm not a hunter, so I don't
not
know.
that I know of. No, I haven't hunted probably in 20 years. Just
that
because.
sucks.
Well,
You're busy.
yeah. Since I started writing, I haven't been hunting.
Because you did say you started writing roughly 2000.
2000. Yeah.
2000.
Yeah.
Damn.
So what was growing up small town like going into high school? Like, did you play sports or anything?
Where did you go to high school?
I went to Corydon Central High School.
Okay.
Basically, I wrestled when I was younger. A little. I played basketball in 5th grade, and then when I was going to 6th grade, I joined a karate club, and I studied karate till I was 16 or 17. And then when I graduated, I started studying traditional Chinese martial arts, which is where I met Donnie. So,
Oh, sick, dude.
I was working on a lumber yard.
And for those who don't know, again, just reiterating, Donnie is over here, was kind enough to accompany Frank Bill on the long drive from Corydon, Indiana. He's sitting off camera here. He's about to light up some more incense for us, so I appreciate you, Donnie.
My security detail.
He was like, we're going to 2 sketchy dudes' house. I need the biggest guy I got. That's a friend.
Do you think that like mixed martial arts and karate and stuff like that like was able to help instill some like discipline?
Yeah, I
into-
think early on that's probably what's always pushed me to do what I do. I mean, because like you, I exercise. I'm kind of addicted to it. My wife kind of gets on my ass about it all the time.
Not today. I fucking don't. I fucking ran. I told you about that. I went for a.
You still did, but you still put in some effort,
dude. I was like 7 miles in my head the whole time because I was just going through a rough day, and I was like, I'm trying to like dump the payload, just try to like reset my brain before.
Been there.
You know what I mean? Like you're about to do something big. Like I'm gonna talk to Frank Bill today. I need to reset my brain.
Hey, even David Goggins has bad days.
Yeah, man. And I got on that fucking 7 mile run. I made about 4 1/4, and I I was like, fuck, dude.
You know what Jocko would say? Good.
Yeah.
So you're... So you're not, you never went into the military, but your dad and your grandpa were both.
Yeah, my real grandfather served in World War II. He was very abusive. I grew up hearing these stories of abuse about him. I think my mother was probably 6, and I guess my aunt was, trying to think how much older my aunt is than my mother. Maybe 10. Well, she's can't remember how much older she is than my mom. But anyway, she was the older sister. But, my grandmother incurred all this abuse from my grandfather, who was part of the Army Corps of Engineers, invaded Japan, and had these crazy stories when he was in the nursing home because he ended up having Alzheimer's disease. And, the only people he'd recognize when my mom would go to visit him was her and his other daughter. And he always thought he was in the trenches when he would come in, He'd talk about the people in the trenches with him. But he actually had the old Time Life magazines. I don't know if you're a little younger. They used to have these Time Life magazines from Life magazine.
They were big, right?
Yeah, they were huge.
They were the big.
Well, he always kept them at his house, and it was like, why does he have those? He's like, well, it's because the photographers took pictures of us. We were in war over there, and I kept the ones I was in, which was, at the time I wasn't writing. I wish I would have, Essentially, when we buried him, I didn't really have a connection to him, and I felt kind of odd being there because I didn't know it. Yeah.
So do you ever look back now, how long has it been since he passed?
Oh gosh, I was probably 20, maybe 21. I wasn't. Yeah.
So right before you started writing, do you look back now, 20 some odd years removed from that, and you're like, damn, if I could have gotten some stories from him.
Yeah, it would have been nicer, even speaking to my grandmother more about it. If you read Crimes in Southern Indiana, there's a story in there called The Old Mechanic. And the first part of the story talks about when my grandfather's basically in the other room beating the shit out of my grandmother. And my mom and her sister are sitting on the couch, and there's a bowl of Red Hots in the center of the table.
Yeah.
And they're sitting here listening to this. And he would take a break in between beating her to come back and grab Red Hots. So, oh my God. So my... Sorry. It's crazy. This is crazy. It's crazy. But because my mom and my aunt were so young, their only defense mechanism that they decided, I think it was my aunt who started, when he finally left the room for like the second or third time, she stood up and started spitting in it. And then my mom stood up and spit it, and they'd mix it up and wait for him to come back. What the fuck? And grab and eat it. And that was just, they're like, he's,
And you incorporated that in that story.
That was the opening story. And then 15 years later is me. It's about a 99% true fact story. When I was 14, my mom finally let me see him, and the thing he got to see me and do with me was take me to a gun and knife show, of all things. Now the ending of the story is a lot different than what it was whenever I was with him. So
do you find in a way? So like I've spoken with several like stand-up comedians doing this gig, and a lot of times like when they talk about material they come up with, it's like you just said, like 90%. True.
Yeah, you listen to Richard Pryor,
and then you have to like.
It's always a story,
and then you have to make it funny. You know what I mean? So then you got to like add a little.
I just make it darker,
right? So I was going to ask, is that kind of the same for you? Like a lot of your stories are basically like 90% here, 70% of this, and then maybe you dash in 10% of this other true story, and that's kind of your scientific equation of like writing. Or like putting the story together, at least. Maybe not writing physically, but
it's with me. It's more about you take the facts, you flip them upside down, and I always write about what I know and the things I'm interested in. If I don't know about it, I research it.
Okay,
which is why I always travel with him on his as a beat cop.
Now, okay, so sticking a little to the timeline. So high school, you're going there and you're experiencing some of that stuff. What do you do when you get out of high school? Out of CHS, represent, shout out to Corden High School.
Yeah.
Or Central? What was it called? Central?
Gordon Central High School.
Gordon
I
Central
worked
High
for a rent-to-own store for about a year and a half. And I'm trying to think here. I think it was about a year and a half. Then I worked for a place called Home Quarters for about another year, it's kind of the same thing as Home Depot.
Okay.
And then when Home Depot finally realized there was a Home Quarters where we were at, they came in and knocked them out of the water.
They shut that shit down
Yeah,
real fast.
real fast.
Yeah, shout out to corporate America fucking ripping the blue collar dick off for the last fucking 200 years.
But while I was at Home Quarters, I ended up getting a job in a factory, basically.
Okay, what kind of factory?
It's a chemical plant, and then I ended
It's not the clay stuff, is it? From Back to the Dirt, it's not that.
it was part of that division, but I didn't start working in that division until I'd been in the factory for about 4 or 5 years. And what it is, you have bid jobs that come up and you bid on them, and highest bidder gets it because it's all by seniority.
Oh, okay.
And this was more of a cleaner building, and that's where I went to. And of course, then I was in that explosion. It's in the book. That's a real thing that happened.
That's a real thing that happened.
Yeah, I can tell you that.
So you really
too.
beat the shit out of that guy right before?
I didn't beat the shit out of the
I'm
guy, but we did have an explosion. I had to rip an air conditioner out of the wall and climb
so that
through.
part was true, like
Yeah.
where you climbed it. He climbed through the vent. Mr. Miles,
And you said in a previous interview that like the people that had to put the air vent in were like, we have no clue how you ripped this thing.
Yeah, it took them 2 days to put it in the wall. They're like, how the fuck did you get out there? I was like, it's adrenaline, dude.
yeah, you're
The
fucking
maintenance guys, you know.
Right.
You're jacked. Well, also you're in really good shape, but you're also jacked in the sense that like your adrenaline is probably shooting through the fucking. So I've been
I was pissed. I mean, I was like, these motherfuckers aren't going to kill me.
Yeah, they're trying to.
I was trying to get through the ceiling. I went through the ceiling. You couldn't go out there. I opened the door. I couldn't get out the door because it was
pitch black.
Pitch black.
Yeah, all the power's out.
Well,
It wasn't the power. That was smoke because it had burnt that clay up. So it was all residue. That's how thick it was.
I just remember it being black as night in the store.
It is
you couldn't
thick.
see anything.
And the beating up part, somebody at your work actually beat somebody else up that owed them money. It wasn't over steroids or something along those lines.
No, it was actually, there was a guy, I don't know. I think it's okay to use his name. I'll just use his first name was Bruce. He looked like
We'll leave that in. There's no.
he looked like
identifiers
the dude from Lucky Charms, but he was a big, tall dude. He had
What?
because of the red hair.
He's Irish?
He looked Irish. He looks Irish. Pale, red hair, and he always wore a butt pirate. He always what they call with the do rag on his head.
Jesus.
He had actually left there before I'd heard this. This happened before I'd ever hired him because he's a little older. He had left and then come back. He's kind of mature now and he's a little older. They had rehired him, and he was telling the story one night that there was a guy that he worked with down the street, and he kept lending him money to eat, and the guy's like, he's got to pay him back, and he's like, I'll get you next week. I'll get you next week. And finally he's like, motherfucker, next week's too long. He said he beat the shit out of him, put him in his truck, and drove him to an ATM and made him pay him back. He said, take the money out. You just have to know him. He's cool as shit.
That's an alpha move if I ever fucking heard one, dude.
Stud.
Not fucking dicking around.
The Boy
Oh,
Scout badge.
I mean, when he came out to the plant, he was still smoking Marlboro Reds and drinking Budweiser. I mean, he was 100%.
Stud.
Yeah.
Thoroughbred.
He had that real cringy, grungy voice from smoking 3 packs of cigarettes
when do you
a
think
day.
you first started getting into writing?
When did I always kept a journal when I was younger, like around 14 or 15. I just always kept journals. I don't still have them. And then when I started studying Chinese martial arts, our teacher had us keep a journal, and I always wrote down workouts and everything like that.
Kicked this dude's ass outside the 7-Eleven today. His name was John. He tried to take my Sprite.
That was just something I always, that part of your day, your training, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
When did you think you first started to like write something that you were like, this could be like a book or an article or your blog?
A story.
Well, I went to see Fight Club, the movie, because I was never really into reading fiction.
Yeah.
I read a lot of nonfiction, serial killers, that kind of stuff, Asian culture, beliefs, that kind of stuff. Taoism, Buddhism, about
Art of War type stuff.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And when I went to see Fight Club, I seen it was written by Chuck Palahniuk. Watched the movie, I was like, fuck, I got to read this guy's book. Couldn't find the book, but I found his other books, and that turned me on. I was like, I think I can do this, because every line was like a one-liner as I sit there read through it.
It's intense the way that you write. The way that you write is like, I really emphasize the no filter. So like if you've never heard of Frank Bill and you go get his newest book, Back to the Dirt, or any of his other 5 before Back to the Dirt, right? And then Back to the Dirt is number 6.
No, actually, you've got Crimes, you've got Donnybrook, you got The Savage, The Ravaged,
And now Back to the Dirt.
Now Back to the Dirt. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so any of the other 4, but if you pick one of these books up, like just know there's no fucking filter. Like,
and I wrote 4 issues of the Crow comic book. I did that too.
I actually, I was reading your book, and a colleague of mine at work, I had referenced that I was like, hey, I'm going to interview this guy. I was really pumped about it. I was like, his material's great. He's like, no filter. He's fucking, and this person liked to read a lot. And she was like, well, what are some of his other stuffs? Because she was like fiending for a new book. And I was like, well, he's got one out. He told me to read this one first, and it's called Crimes in Southern Indiana. And she was like, okay, yeah, I'll go get that like now. And she like goes and gets it. And I didn't like do any pre-study. This is where I fucked up. I don't know what she reads normally.
Yeah.
So she goes and gets Crimes in Southern Indiana, which shout out to her, dude. She's supporting the cause, but she made it through like the first 90 pages. And she was like, this is the most fucked up shit I've ever read. And I was like, yeah, when I said he didn't have a filter, like it was pretty bad. And she was like, I think there's like a story about it, like in there or something.
Yeah, they
something close to
the Hill Clan,
yeah,
the marijuana growers.
She made it that far.
Yeah, those first 3 stories were in Playboy. Yeah, they
she made it that far.
End up pimping out the young daughter because the grandfather sells his granddaughter to pay for his wife's cancer medication.
Yeah. So definitely raw, definitely real.
Oh yeah,
in a very real way. It's a
well,
fiction.
I think
but
a lot of like your stories they've got this factual background, like your main character you said is like you.
Miles.
Miles is like you
Right.
and your dad put together in a way. And then like you, I'm referencing other podcasts, but you said there's almost like other characters that like are real life people, and I feel like because of that, like you can put us there in that scene so much better versus like somebody that's just like, oh, this made up character here and here. Like you actually have a face in your mind that you're trying to.
Yeah, and at first, when I read Chuck Palahniuk, what I did was I researched him, and it's a minimalist style, so that turned me on to other minimalists. And the closest thing,
I'm not.
Well, as a minimalist style, you're not using, as you were talking earlier, too many adjectives. Too many descriptions. You're right on point, and you really have to obsess over those words and those sentences to get it. I mean, you have to get everything down first, and you go back over, and it's just like you really, it's like a workout. I mean, when I get done writing for whatever it's 4, 6, 8 hours, it's like a dopamine hit. Because when I read over it again and again and again, it's like I get the flow.
Do you ever find, so like I do a lot of like video projects and stuff, and so like there's times where I'm doing this video project that's maybe 15 minutes long,
right?
And I'm going and I'm like, I get done with my day's work and I set it down. Well, the next day when I go down, I rewatch everything or reread, what I've got. And then I end up spending 2 hours adjusting that. Yep. And then it's like I never get to add on or do the end. It's the
exact same thing, yeah. Because you just keep narrowing it down and whittling it until you get it where it needs to be.
And then you have a deadline and you're like, oh man, I got so much to do. And then you realize you got 3 minutes worth of work on the back end.
Don't mind me. I'm just adjusting my chair, dude. I don't know who was sitting in my chair. Probably Don. Somebody was fucking.
I didn't think
shit.
your arm would go elbow deep.
Sometimes, dude. Are you into cattle insemination? You ever seen that before? That's pretty fucking wild.
Yeah, jackass.
Fucking crazy how they do that shit.
Yeah.
The first time I saw that was on Nat Geo. But anyways, so so you're getting out of high school. You've been keeping these journals, and then you start getting into telling stories. Roughly when? Again, what time frame is that?
Around 2000, 1999. It was after that because Chuck Palahniuk turned me on to Larry Brown. That's what I was trying to get to. Is Larry Brown, who's from Mississippi, from Oxford, Mississippi, down that area.
Okay.
He's a Southern writer. Whenever I discovered him, it was like I read some Big Bad Love. I read Father and Son, Joe, Faye. And I was like Facing the Music, and it was like, he's from Mississippi, I'm from Indiana, but we write about the same, it's the same people. It's like he had the same upbringing that I had.
So when do you start? What is your first published project, and when do you start that? Maybe it's not even like a full book.
Oh, the first story I ever wrote
published
was it's called Acting Out, and it got published online when I first sent it. It's the first story I wrote, sent out, and somebody published it. And I thought, I'm on to something. But then it was like 4 or 5 years later before anything else ever got published.
When was that?
Gosh, it was probably around 2000, 2001.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah. It's in the book of short stories, actually.
So we were talking about what right before
the first piece of work that got published.
Yeah, and it was called what again?
Acting Out.
Acting Out.
Yeah.
And who was it that published? Do you happen to recall?
I think it was called The Circle magazine. They're not even around anymore.
So it got published in a magazine.
But then nothing Were you
Another
were you
5
still
years.
submitting projects and writing other stuff in that 4 to 5 years until something else got picked up?
Yep.
And these are all short,
Yeah,
like
short.
magazines style stories?
It's like college journals, whatever. Used to, you could buy this. It looked like an encyclopedia. It was called Writer's Digest, and it would give you all. They'd have one for short stories and have one for like novels, and it'd tell you who you could submit to. And they have one for agents,
Like a tool that you can use.
Yeah,
as a
that's
writer.
really before the internet was getting big.
Yeah, the towers hadn't gone down yet.
No,
so
no.
shout out to those guys.
Yeah.
Never forget, you know.
For sure.
Uh,
Do you remember where you were at during 9/11, 2001?
Yeah, I had just gotten off work and I was in bed. My wife woke me up. I remember what time it was that early morning about it happening.
It was like 9 a.m., 8 or
Yeah,
9
I
a.m.
would
The
say-
first one got hit. It was so weird because I was in homeroom. I feel like everybody that was alive during that time, you know exactly the place, almost exactly what you were wearing. It's really weird. Do you remember where you were at?
Yeah.
What were you wearing? I mean,
I
where
don't
were
remember
you?
what I was wearing. I was at Holy Spirit Elementary School.
It's fucking crazy, dude. Yeah, you're because he's quite a bit younger than me. He's like 20. How old are you?
28,
28. Yeah, and
I
I'm
think.
33. I was actually in 6th grade homeroom when it happened. Wild stuff. No, so what's the next thing that gets published after acting out through that magazine?
Well,
You said it was another 5 years.
yeah, because it's weird. I wrote that short story and I started trying to write a novel.
Right out the gate.
And I based it around that short story called Acting Out, and couldn't get it published. And I wrote some other short stories, and then I tried to write another novel that was pretty close. I actually got some pretty good, like when you send things out, you would send it with a self-addressed stamped envelope. You send sample pages or whatever. Usually you just get this little, it's almost like a business card that basically says, sorry, please try again. But if you got something back and somebody actually wrote on it and said, hey, we enjoyed this, but maybe try this, but please submit again because we like your stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
That happened with the old mechanic, and that happened with there was some other stuff it happened with.
Were some of these shorter stories, like the old mechanic from Crimes in Southern Indiana, were they like initially all going to be novels, or were just some of
No,
them?
because I started off writing novels for whatever reason, and when I started writing short stories, it kind of helped me understand how to formulate things into 5 or 10 pages and just make it really tight.
Like we were talking about before, that minimalist style, like really dialing it in, frame for frame, scene for scene.
Yep.
I do enjoy that a lot, especially with Miles and the way that one of my favorite. How much are we allowed to talk about Back to the Dirt today? So the book's already released.
Everything.
At any depth. One of my favorite scenes is we're very pro drugs on this show, so we talk about drugs often. The one thing that I found interesting is
That
trip with Miles, which is basically the last quarter of the book. He's just on the whole time.
Yep.
And you're like, he can't separate reality from what's happening.
No, that kind of happens. Yeah.
Like talking to
So,
yes.
forewarning, or spoiler alert, the last quarter, the protagonist is on the whole time.
Yes.
I really enjoyed, like I told you in that DM that I sent you, I was like, the last 80 pages, I just fucking ripped through them, dude. I couldn't turn the page quick enough. But like the fact that he just couldn't separate things, like this is happening, but I know that it can't be happening. And then the way that you described him driving in the truck and like the kind of peacefulness and the blissfulness of like him just enjoying the drive. But anyway, so my question is, how do we get there? Like, how do you have this idea for a quarter of your book?
Well, I had it early. I had it early on because I did when I was younger. It used to be a thing. I was telling you earlier, we used to have a guy we used to buy it from on the weekends. He used to travel with the Grateful Dead, and he'd bring it in after he'd go out with them, and we'd go buy from him all the time until we pulled up one day and the DEA was there, and we kept on driving as they were busting him. And then he ended up getting out, and we started buying it from him again. But that was just something we did on the weekends.
That's like a prerequisite. Like if you tour with the Grateful Dead, you have to have like an eighth of mushrooms or like 6 sheets of on you.
I've seen them once. The Steve Miller Band opened up for them, and they
fucking love Steve Miller Band.
There was a lot of
rock, dude.
Naked people running around, and they would actually pass the joints down the rows, like everybody would take a hit and they'd pass it on, and then
that was pre-COVID. Clearly,
you had to pay attention because you couldn't just walk up to somebody and ask them, I guess, unless you knew the person who was selling. But people would walk by and say doses, and you had to figure out who said it. Hey, that right here, 3, 4, 5. Hey, I got
with your wisdom with the or if you will, for the layman. So I've heard stories, like I've seen it. Where did I see it? I think I've seen it in a film or maybe a TV series or something. But oh yeah, it was the last Tarantino movie that came out, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Acid dipped cigarette. Is that a real thing?
I don't know. I've never.
There's like
There is liquid, yeah.
So you can dip a cigarette, or
Don't know.
no, it wasn't a cigarette. It might have been a joint. I can't remember, but it was a rolled something. Have you ever seen that before?
Mm-mm.
You haven't?
No, I just know if you they come in a sheet and the little squares are like the size of my pinky fingernail.
Yeah, and you just pop it in.
And if you bought 10 hits, you only want to take 3, 4, or 5, you could cut them off, put them in plastic, and keep them in the freezer.
The guy
so they didn't go bad.
The guy that sells fucking Miles at the liquor store, he like took no time to convince him. He was like getting his shit and then walking out the store, and he was like, "Oh yeah, man, I forgot to tell you." And he's like, "What do you got?" And he was like,
Well, I based him off of a guy I went to school with who worked at our liquor store downtown, Kingsley, Victor. Yeah, he's a good guy. Steven. Victor was his brother.
"Shout out to Steven, dude.
Steven's a good guy. Military guy, too, retired military.
Dude, I love my military
And
bros.
he loves Mustangs. Yeah.
He's a bro for sure.
Steven's a good guy.
We would probably be boys.
But I was gonna say,
He's a good guy.
you're like soaking up so much life experience and converting it into books. Is that like you just seem to be like you're soaking up information from everybody around you almost as like in a like folder and storing it for like whenever you need it?
Sometimes, I mean, I do write a lot of things down. I try to, but sometimes you just get up and it's like, I just want to get up, get the coffee going, or maybe a cup of green tea, get some cold water on my head, a little cold water on my face, and get to whatever I'm doing during the day. I try to sit down and write for like the first 10 minutes when I get up. And then if I'm at work at night, I try to write down what's happened throughout the day. And I try to think of not like, oh, the weather was I always try to think, what was the conflict of the day? How bad did I piss my wife off today? And how bad did she piss me off? Or,
I think that's a safe argument that every husband has in their head. I think they just wake up and they're like,
I've got a good wife. I can't complain.
Well, do you ever find time?
It's never her. It's always you. You're like, what did I fuck up
That's
today?
what she tells me.
I screwed something up today. What was it?
Do you ever find in that like 10 minutes where an idea is really flowing and it takes longer and you're like calling, hey, work, I'm going to be a little later?
I'll write in my truck, and I've even got I've got a recorder because I'll record now too. Recording doesn't always work that great, but yeah, I'll be swerving and writing stuff on either on my phone or in a moleskin or my journal. Yeah.
So that's interesting. We talk often about these little miniature computers that we have in our pockets nowadays. In the last 15 years, these phones that were actually we utilize them heavily. Thomas is a big advocate for that. So do you find that you do use your iPhone a lot, or your Android or whatever cell phone device? Do you use that often with the writing process, whether it be a voice memo or the little notepad?
Well, as you know, the best thing about which I thought all the phones and computers were the same, but I've got an Apple and a Mac. You can just
Converts
it just
right over.
syncs right over. My buddy's like, no, it doesn't do that with everything. I'm like, oh, I thought it did.
So actually, I typed up our intro for the show on my MacBook.
Shoot it back over, back and forth.
It just does it automatically. And I pull my
syncs.
notes up, and it's right here.
It's awesome.
It's pretty tight, dude. Honestly, if you're not using Macintosh, go get fucked.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. There's whatever. I guess PCs are okay. No, but I'm really interested about the overall. So we can talk more about.
So you wrote Back to the Dirt and The Savage at the same time?
Yeah, what I would do, because I've got ADD bad. I mean, it's like I got to switch back and forth, which you really see that in Donnybrook because it's the multiple layers of characters, and the Savage. But basically what I would do, I'd write 20, 30 pages, get kind of bored, and switch back over to the other one when I got 100 pages of each and had them cleaned up. I sent them to my agent, and then we passed it on to my publisher, and they were interested.
So does somebody else blend that story together for you? Or do you just have like 12 scenes that you write 100 pages for, and you're like, hey, here's the story, here's the beginning.
No, I do.
So you do the blending of the different time jumps, if you will.
Yeah, the thing with like
spatial jumps,
because the Savage is probably like the biggest book I've written. I think it's between 400 and 500 pages. Ooh. It's a pretty thick.
Probably take me a month to read.
We were trying to figure out how to, because it's this. Did we want to use before and after, then and now? Because there's a shifting back and forth all the way through. And they kind of helped me with that, but everything was there. It was in order. It was just a matter of how do we want to show this perspective so somebody didn't get lost as to what's going on.
Yeah.
What was that like getting your first book published? Like that process?
It was kind of a breath of fresh air because now you had somebody to kind of help you out. Because for the longest, I spent 8 years not knowing what the fuck I was doing.
Right.
I didn't know if I was doing right or wrong. I worked with a guy who took every college class you could take. I think they always called him a lifetime student before he decided to be a geography major, but he took fiction classes. And he said, fuck, that was too much work, man. So he started reading my stuff early on. I started working with him like around 2007, 2008, right before I got published. And he was like, by then I understood what I was doing. He's like, I don't know what you're doing wrong per se. It's just you're not getting to the right person, you know? And so you had to find but yeah, when I got a publisher, it was like, it wasn't the norm. Because normally you send something out, all the horror stories you hear is like it might take 6, 8, 10 months. And I heard something in 2 weeks. So
whenever whenever you send a sample to a publisher, like with the goal to get published, you don't have the whole book written at that point, right?
You do it first.
You do.
I think once
as a new author, you mean?
As a new author, yeah, you've got to have something.
You've got to have the whole content,
right? I had but the agent takes care of that.
Okay,
and then she writes proposal. She knows editors at each of the houses that would be interested in what you're writing. She has this relationship with them.
Yeah.
And my editor had came from Riverhead, and he had made a big splash at Riverhead with some of the people he had been an editor for. And he had a new idea called FSG Originals, which was raw, new voices we'd never heard before, written differently than other people write.
Yeah.
Kind of in your face, in a sense.
I like that shit.
My manuscript was the first one to come across his desk, which was Donnybrook. And he's like, well, it's definitely not boring. Has he written anything else? And she's like, I've got a book of short stories also, if you're interested. He said, definitely. He read that and got back with her and said, but Frank want to talk to me and my assistant editor for this new label I'm starting with for our Ross and Durrell.
Did they just approach you about the movie? Is that like a new thing? Or
what's that?
Because Donnybrook's about to be a movie, right?
It's already been a movie. Yeah,
okay.
That was in 2018, yeah.
How did that process happen? So the book gets published, clearly, or was it like synchronously, if you will? Did it happen at the same time? Like, hey, we're going to adopt this, and we also have a director or a film company on board?
No, when FSG bought the book, publishing contract, and we went through a whole process of while we're doing edits. I've just got such a good editor. He has so many connections. He had sent the samples of the book out as we were editing to different contacts he had, which helped with sell of foreign rights.
Right.
At the same time, whenever Crimes came out, and then Donnybrook, I ended up going to Los Angeles for the Los Angeles Times Book Festival. And in there somewheres when I met Sherry Smiley, who's my film agent. And when I came out there, she set everything up for me to meet studios when I went out. Because she was super excited. She wanted me to adapt it and everything else. I did adapt it. They did buy my script, but they didn't use it. They bought it, but didn't use it. But that's another story. But anyway, I did what they call the water bottle tour.
What is that?
Basically, you go to a studio. You walk in. Hi, Mr. Bill. You're here to see so-and-so about Donnybrook. Yeah, it'll be a second. Would you like a bottle of water? Yeah, I'll take a bottle of water. By the third place you go to visit, would you like a bottle of water? No, I'd like to use your bathroom. I don't want any more water.
I got to take a fucking piss.
Exactly. But
I'm hydrated.
But yeah, I met a lot of people who were interested in it, but it just never sold at first. It was probably about a year or two later before it actually, I think it was 2 years later, maybe 3 before it sold. And then CBS had the rights to the first book for about 4 or 5 years until they let it run out. It actually, they rebought them, but around 2018 when it finally lapsed, like the second or third time, they didn't go back up on it.
So what made you hold back on releasing Back to the Dirt to a certain time?
Well, it wasn't me per se. Part of it was because I was busy after Donnybrook I ended up getting the comic book thing, and I had pitched my own comic book series that this other comic book company was going to buy, but it took them forever to negotiate this contract with my agent, which, as she told him, we don't go with your contract because I'm his agent and we're going to negotiate it. We're not going by your terms. We're going to negotiate these terms.
What's that like, having somebody like advocating for you? Just like, hey.
It's awesome. Stacia's an awesome agent. I mean, she's as good of a agent as Rose is a publicist. She listens and she does a very good job.
Shout out. Shut up. We got to talk about Rose. Whatever question you were about to ask, put that shit on.
Shout out to Rose.
Oh, I thought you were about to ask a question, dude. Rose, I forget her last name. Is it Sheeran?
Is it Sheehan?
Sheehan.
I'm horrible at pronouncing people's names, but
as am I. Dude, such a pleasure to work with her. Honestly, the first publicist I've had to work with thus far.
She's awesome.
Yeah, we've got one other guy that does a podcast, and he's a former musician. He's got like a publicist type situation that we're dealing with. But Rose was just an absolute pleasure to work with. So I hope you see this, Rose. Thank you. No, you have like really great representation all the way around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's got to be weird. Do you think about that ever? It's just like I'm just a guy writing a story, and here these people are. They're like,
Yeah, because there was so many horror stories going in, you know, when I started to get published, and I did like one of the very first, I think, kind of helped launch something that was called No Earth to Bar before I ever got published by picked up. And that's the guys that were hosting me in St. Louis, Jed Ayers, Anthony Hill Smith, who used to run Plots with Guns, who I'd published a lot of stories there. He's like, you need to go somewhere else because I'm going to keep publishing everything you write. You know, you need to branch out a little bit. Not that I don't love your work. And Anthony's a really good guy. He's a college professor at the University of Minnesota. And Scott Phillips, that was the other guy that was hosting North to Bar, who wrote The Ice Harvest. I don't know if you've all ever seen the movie with John Cusack.
no, I haven't.
And Billy Bob Thornton. But
Okay. Shout out to John Cusack, man. He's crushing it. No, but it's got to be crazy. I think about like one day if this, it will one day when this podcast like really takes off and we actually need an agent or a publicist or somebody that represents us legally. I think that's got to be a neat feeling that you're just creating this art, if you will. You know what I mean? Something that you just have always enjoyed doing.
Right.
And now you're telling these stories. I mean, really with no holds bars. Like you're telling the story the way you want to tell it. With a couple of exceptions we talked about pre-show.
Right. Yeah.
But basically, you're telling these stories raw, in your face, writing the way that you write, and you're just having a good time. And then these people are like, hey, we'll give you this money. And you have this person that steps in the way, and they're like, no. Here's how we're going to do this.
Yeah, Stacia's awesome.
Do you ever take a minute to just like sit back and think about how fucking weird that is, man? Like, that's fucking weird.
For just a regular dude, yeah.
Yeah, it's
different.
fucking weird, man.
Do you, like the fact that you choose to still work too, you know, like you're still getting that like blue collar input,
at 9
you know
to
what I mean?
5,
Like
yeah.
you mentioned in other podcasts as well, like some people aren't necessarily happy with the way people converse, but you're like, that's the construction job site talk. That's the warehouse talk. That's, you know, and that's,
Yeah, it is.
You
It
find
is.
that like working in more of like a,
There's
once you climb the ladder, it's like, you got to get cleaner each ring you go.
I guess I have two questions specifically about Back to the Dirt. I'm just fucking enthralled with this book, dude. This is the first book that I've read since I don't even know. Lone
Handed a greater
Survivor.
purpose.
Yeah, Handed a Greater Purpose was phenomenal. But as far as fiction goes, because I'm more of a fiction guy, so as far as a fictional storytelling perspective, I mean, like I don't know the last book that I've read that I enjoyed more than Back to the Dirt.
Thank you.
That being said. Again, it's already released. That being said, I have two questions about it. The first one is
Go buy it.
now. It's like $20.
Buy two. Buy one for your grandmother.
Yeah, it's like $40. No, but so the one question I have is, what is one of your favorite things about this book? And that's a broad question. It could be the story, it could be the process, it could be anything. What is and was your favorite thing about Back to the Dirt?
There's probably more than one. I mean, one was being able to kind of represent the culture that I'm from and to show where my dad came from, where I came from. But it was also to show this connection of Nathaniel and his nephew, which was something that originally wasn't like that. You know, originally when I wrote this second part of the book, Nathaniel was more of a militia type leader, and he was really much darker. But when we went through the whole editing process and notes,
Nathaniel wound up being a sheriff, right?
Well, he was a law enforcement, but he ends up being kind of like the greater good, whereas before he was kind of like the guy I don't want to give too many spoilers, but he's kind of hunting for the person who's basically murdered his brother and sister-in-law.
Yeah.
But he's like blood ravaged, hunting them down, you know,
Yeah.
and there's some torture scenes and stuff we had to cut out because it wasn't going to fit the way that I was going to remold it. So
That's got to kind of suck.
well, no, because, you know, it was more of a rough draft. The first part of the book was pretty solid. And the second part, it was kind of like a rough draft. And so that's why I'd say, like we were asking about getting a publisher, it's great because now you have an editor and they can shoot these ideas off of them. They can give input. And it's kind of like, I've got two really great editors.
Do you ever take that chapter and just like copy and paste it into a separate document? That way you're like, if I ever want to expand on this idea or this, go back.
Yeah,
to this
I've still got the original manuscript. But this is by far is more balanced than, they pulled more out of me for Shelby's character to get more of her backstory about where these mental problems are coming from.
Don't give it away. It's, dude, such a great fucking story, man. Dude, threw me for a fucking loop. Like,
now the stripper I dated when I was younger didn't have those mental problems.
That's a real club, by the way, too.
Deja Vu, that's where she worked.
Yeah, the VU, man. Yeah. Shout out to the VU in the Lou. And then the second really broad question I have about the book is, if you had to, does this book have a grand message? And if so, what is it to you?
I think you find out at the end, kind of.
Yeah, you don't really know. I mean, there's no. It's
as far as like, I guess like in my mind, it's like it's hard to like put a specific message to it, but it's, to me, you present Miles, this protagonist, and the whole show essentially starts with him and kind of revolves around him until the Nathaniel character comes into play. But he has this like really rough edge and really kind of bad past, and like he's just kind of really rough around the edges, but then also you really emphasize that he is for the people, non-discriminatory, very open-minded, essentially. Like, it's kind of like
that's my parents. That's how my mom and dad
type situation, but it's in one person.
Yeah,
it's really strange. That's kind of the message to me, is that like, I mean, obviously not the grandiose story. That's not what the story is about. But like, the message is that, to me, that like you can be, kind of like rough around the edges, not a perfect person. Maybe you like to use recreational drugs. Maybe you swear a lot. Maybe you use whatever. Doesn't matter, but you can still be a good dude or a good girl. You know what I mean? That's kind of like what I took away from.
I think it's that, and there's also everybody's got demons because he carries these ghosts with him.
Yeah,
and that's my dad carried those for him for years and years.
Damn,
and years.
Actually,
and years.
I forgot about the ghost that's like riding with him the whole time.
Yeah, it's Dexter's Dark Passenger.
I also like when the Vietnam stuff or whatever. Like, it reminds you of that Netflix movie where that it's got the kid that plays Spider-Man, and he's the son, and the dad comes back from like Vietnam and makes like a cross altar. Have you not seen that?
Mm-hmm. I've not.
Donald Ray Pollock wrote the book. It's called Devil All the Time.
Yeah, Devil All the Time.
Great book.
Yeah, but I almost picture like Miles as like that dad in a way.
Yeah.
Like when I was reading the book, I was like that mental image of.
Speaking of Dexter, did you ever read the novel?
No, I've never read the novel.
Wow.
Good.
I never even started the show. Like, I had a bunch of friends. Like, the show, it was released in like, I think like 2003 or something like that. But then fucking like, I had never watched it. I had all these friends that told me about it. It's a great show. Watch it. Great show. Well, I wound up having to read it for my English 105 or whatever at University of Evansville here. Okay. And there was like one of the assigned readings, and I read through it, and I was like, God damn. Like, God damn, this is a good fucking story, dude.
I think the first season's based off of the first book, if I remember reading correctly. I think so.
It is entirely the first season where they hunt down who they call the ice truck killer.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's like Miami Predators, ice rink involved, some body parts getting taken apart, some idolization of like another serial killer in the town. I don't want to give too much away if you've never seen Dexter, but I brag on Dexter all the fucking time. Like, it's a very well put together.
I'll have to read it. I've never read it.
The book, clearly the first book is way better than the first season.
Have you had the same publisher all the way through all the books?
Yeah.
Yep. And then speaking of fiction and like other writers, like, do you have someone that you had, that you've had the pleasure of working with along this journey through writing, maybe other authors, other people that have just helped you write? Or is there any like key names that stick out, or folks that you've worked with in this industry, if you will?
Early on, yeah, because it was kind of like, it was when I started to get published, it was 2008, 2009. It's like when Facebook and Twitter hit, and there was a group of us that just kind of connected. And I was like with Jed, because Jed knew Scott, who was published, and Jed used to work at the Barnes & Noble. He was a manager, and he knew when Scott came, he's like, hey, you're the guy who wrote The Ice Harvest, and they started talking. He's like, started wanting to uncomfortably slipping pages of some stuff he's written. He's like, I don't know if you want to read this, Scott. And Scott's like, I don't know, dude. And Scott used to hang out over in France, I think, with James Crumley, if I remember, who's a crime writer, if I remember correctly, from old school. But there was a group of us that connected online. Jed was one, Keith Rawlinson's another. I don't know whatever happened to Keith. I think he lost his shit and got divorced and started doing meth again or something.
Oh,
and
fuck.
Todd Robinson, who was the editor at Thug Lit, connected with him and published with him. He wrote a really quality journal. And the thing was, you had these guys that had put these journals up, and they were getting young writers like me to write in crime. And what people didn't realize is that there's agents reading through those. But you don't know it. I didn't know at the time either,
Yeah.
I just got recommended, hey, you need to check out Stacia Decker. And Kyle Miner was another guy. He's actually a professor now up in Indianapolis. But those guys always kind of stuck with me.
You got a lot of friends that are professors.
Yeah, except me. They wouldn't have me. So.
What was it?
I don't know if your style is there
Probably not.
what they want in the university. Listen here, cocksuckers.
I will kick your fucking teeth down your goddamn throat.
Did you only have one book that became a New York Times bestseller so far?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that one with Norman. But I mean,
that was
Crimes in Donnybrook have went into 4th, 5th, 6th printing. So,
Dude, I'm telling you, this Back to the Dirt. And again, I can't compare it to the other stuff. I need to get my hands on some. I need to do Crimes in Southern Indiana. That's where I need to go next. That's what you would advise, right? Like that's kind of
I would advise
a
that
good place to start. In
all of them.
Well, I will eventually.
I think you should read all of them.
But is there like an order? Are any of these books like tied to one another? You said, I think in that DM, that Crimes in Southern Indiana kind of ties to
Donnybrook. There's a
Donnybrook. Okay.
There's a short story in there called Cold Hard Love, which gives the story, like the backstory of Belmont McGill, who is the organizer of the Donnybrook, which is the bare knuckle boxing tournament.
Thank you, because not all our listeners are drunken Irishmen, so they might not get the reference. Which, by the way, one of my favorite scenes in fucking You Like Dags? What fucking movie is that?
I'm not sure.
Where Brad Pitt's like in the bare knuckle fighting.
Oh yes,
you like Dags? You like
Snatched.
Dags?
Snatch.
Yeah, fucking love that movie. You like Dags?
That's fucking awesome movie.
Dags?
Guy Ritchie.
Yeah, dude, Guy Ritchie, fucking stud.
He is awesome.
No, okay. So speaking of film, do you have like a favorite film or a favorite, maybe even a favorite like director, or if not even that, like a favorite style, favorite genre?
I really like the guy who did The Raid 1 and 2, and then he turned around to Gangs of London. I think he produces it. I just like that. It's just up in your face. It's violent. There's no holds barred.
I like that as well. I've not seen Raid. But dude, the another guy that I really like is that we talked about it pre-show, the guy who did Friday Night Lights. He shoots a very kind of, in a different way, but very real, very in your face kind of storytelling. And he actually directed the movie for Lone Survivor, Marcus Luttrell. Phenomenal
He did
film.
Rundown. I think it was one of his first movies.
Did he do the Rundown?
Yeah, I think it's one of his first movies.
With The Rock?
Yeah, I think it's one of his first
We drink
movies.
his tequila all the time.
Are
you drinking his tequila tonight?
Yeah, I have
Peter
a glass.
Berg. Yeah.
Peter Berg, yeah. Kind of almost looks like Billy Bob Thornton in a weird way.
Yeah.
Like Billy Bob's cousin. That's interesting though. So you're very like blunt force trauma like style storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you're into.
Yeah.
Where do you think you get that from? Like, where do you get that style? Or is this just like...
I think it's just from growing up and always hearing harsh stories. And I mean, it's just, when you grow up hunting and you're just in the environment, it's normal to kill an animal for your table and eat it, where you're going to skin it and take care of it and process it right there. You don't take it to the locker plant.
What was it like when you were learning Chinese culture? Being from like Corden, and you said you were learning about like Buddhism, Taoism, and stuff like that. What was that?
I think it's just, it was more of a, to me, Buddhism and Taoism, I mean, they're different, of course, but there's just this more open-minded element where it's not necessarily a God more so as it is just being an enlightened being, putting others before yourself, not being judgmental, but actually following through with that,
Had to steal my steal a Huggy, dude. We don't want to give away any brands.
But because I grew up on Shaw Brother movies. I always loved Shaw Brother, the old westerns, the Chinese westerns. Always loved those.
Chinese and you were saying that they got then they're like all in like the old Chinese samurai.
Yeah, because they would bring in all the Chinese weapons, the frog tie suits, the the hair, would be these big ponytails and things of that nature.
You know, the first use of gunpowder in like military use was by the Mongols, but they used the gunpowder to scare the horses. No, they use it to scare like enemy horses.
I have a question. Speaking of that region, I didn't know that though. It's a fun fact. Did you guys ever see that John Wayne movie where he played fucking Genghis Khan?
No.
Holy fuck! You want to talk about appropriation, dude? Hold on,
God bless you,
dude. Thank you. If you ever get the chance,
I've never seen any John Wayne movies actually.
Really?
And my dad was a Clint Eastwood fan, so we always watched Clint Eastwood.
I'm an Eastwood fan as well. But John Wayne, don't take no shit, partner. I'm Genghis Khan. That's the whole movie. I'm Genghis Khan, and we'll kill them all. It's terrible. And they got him like all like, they paint him like brown, like face, like with the makeup, and like they try to make him look like Mongolian. It's so bad.
Did you ever get into like researching other religions or anything when you were like getting into Taoism or learning about all that?
No, it was more to do with just the style that we were studying. And then after I had left that teacher, he had always talked about another teacher named John Ing. And so my journey was to search out where John Ing was at. And then he actually studied the temples over in China and fled China to come over here and started teaching over here long ago.
That's a wise move. Yeah. It's a wise move.
If you read Donnybrook, the character Fu is based on John. If you description, you look up John, it's like, holy fuck, this is Fu. They look at that, and even John was like, when he's seen the movie, he's like, I like the book better. That's because they wrote you out of it, man. I'm sorry, it sucked. I mean, it would have been a much better movie with them in it, but
yeah, sorry, bro.
They streamlined it, which I understand now. I wrote the book, they made the movie.
Do you ever write like short films or anything and try to enter those in anything?
I've got a screenwriting partner. We adapted Crimes. Everybody said it was too dark, so we're going to adapt Back to the Dirt's our next little venture.
Really?
Yeah, Josh Capps. Yeah, he teaches screenwriting and literature down to Lafayette.
How deep
Louisiana.
into this project are you?
We've been sharing notes, and then he's also got some notes we talked about writing about Moon Flisspart, who's in Crime in Southern Indiana.
Do you have photography or videography experience? Do you have any idea about like film or shades, shadows, coloring, anything like that?
No.
So like you would just be there to like line the story up and tell the story and then use his photography, filmography experience?
Well, he and I would adapt the script, and then we'd have to be executive producers. But yeah, I mean, I've been on a film set, and I've seen the producer pretty much is basically telling the director what to do. When the director does something wrong, he's saying, he's watching a monitor. He's like, fuck. He's out there, cut. That's not right. That's not right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
because he's the money guy,
right.
When you get other producers, some other producers, they latch on to it.
Do you think there will ever be a film? Do you think there could be a possibility where a film could be made that identically and perfectly depicts a book? If it's like a well-written, like short Stephen King book, which I know doesn't exist, but if there's if Stephen King wrote a perfectly written 200-page short novel, do you think in the future there could ever be a film that is like to the T, write nothing out, leave it all in? Do you think that's possible, or has that already been done? And
it's been done. And Billy Bob Thornton got really pissed off about it, said he would never direct another movie. He adapted.
What was it?
I don't know if he adapted, but he directed All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. It's a great movie, and it follows the book, but he has a director's cut that's pretty much the whole movie. It's like the whole book. It's like a 3-hour movie instead of a 2-hour movie. He was pissed off that they wouldn't release it that way. And he said,
Tarantino movie.
He said, I'm not directing any more movies.
That's fucking intense. Speaking of Tarantino, have you ever, I guess, written in the style, you flash back and forth kind of a lot in Back to the Dirt from like, again, there's no chapters. So like you end a paragraph and then you're like, oh shit, now we're in Vietnam. So you the reader has to be like cognizant of that. But like, do you ever think you could write or would you ever write like a Pulp Fiction style story where it's like, we're going to put the ending of this movie in the middle, and then we're going to put the beginning of this movie, we're going to put that at the end, and then we're going to jumble up all this other shit.
Well, you could easily. Once you write the story, you can basically go in and clip this part and move it over here.
Just put it wherever you want it.
You can move those things around.
Do you think there's a benefit to that? Because in film, obviously, Pulp Fiction, it constantly leaves you on the edge.
Right.
And you're like, what the fuck is...
You've got to know right where to cut it.
Yeah.
Where you want to clip this and move it.
You think,
where,
and you think that'd be feasible, like writing a book that way?
Yeah.
Have you ever yet?
No.
Not really.
No.
Back to the Dirt really wasn't that way. You just had a lot of flashes, like where you would cut back in time and then back to current. That was interesting. Me being a poor reader, like there was a lot of jumping in the Back of the Dirt, which I got a hold of it about a quarter of the way through the book. But I'm a very I'm on this timeline. So, like, if I had to read Pulp Fiction in novel form, I would lose I would tear my fuck. If I had hair, I would tear it out.
Well, Tarantino actually writes everything down in a notebook. He writes the entire story out longhand, and then he goes back to adapt it into a screenplay is what he does.
That's wild. He's an interesting dude.
Yep.
His book's really good. The new book.
Not familiar.
Yeah, he just wrote a book
About cinema.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but it's basically where he got his interest for cinema.
Yeah.
And where he started
not Christian
to put
cinema,
it
but
together.
cinema.
Yeah.
I told you he's a little slower. I'm joking.
It was pretty cool.
Cinnamon. I just like fucking with you.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing this job with you.
Jenny.
Yeah.
Forrest Gump over here.
Right.
Put some braces on his legs,
Do
man.
you think that do you think you're gonna have you mentioned how two books kind of tie together, but do you think you're gonna write like a series almost in a way of like a few?
Yeah, that's a good question. Would you ever do a series? Is there one that exists now that you could series out? Could Back to the Dirt continue? Like, is that something you thought about?
No, I mean, there's stories I've thought about telling from crimes to adapt them out more. I even thought about the Disgruntled Americans, stretching that out, giving a backstory to build into what it was, but it kind of takes away from...
We haven't spoken about that really in great length. Can you explain a little bit about Disgruntled Americans and where was that? What was
it starts with an EMP.
Well, no, it doesn't.
The whole idea of the story was, which the end is what sums it up. It wasn't, whenever they go to rob Walmart on Black Friday, it's not about the money. That was the whole, because if it ended and it was all about the money, it's not. The story is no different than another heist story, basically, but it's a rural heist story that's a message that basically says, you're fucking with the middle class and we're done with it.
You get the gist of that story in the first, eight words. It's because it starts with the letter.
Yeah, the letter, dear motherfucker.
Yeah, and then it's love. What was it? Was it Disgruntled Americans? Or it was love. Basically, they sign off, and you're like, "What the fuck is this letter about?"
Yeah, I don't remember.
And then you get into the story, and it's just bonkers bananas the whole way through. But they essentially rob one of these city buses, or one of the city trucks, like Citibank trucks. Yeah, they robbed a city bus, dude.
Everybody's blankets in the bag. Is that a case of beer underneath your seat?
I know I've got the story on here
Jesus
somewhere.
Christ. Yeah, you've recently just sent it to me, actually. It was such a good read, and it was published in Playboy magazine. That's the one we mentioned early in the show, where it's about a 15-minute read, 20-minute read. I knocked it out in like 8 minutes, I swear to God. It was so good.
It's adrenaline. I mean, that was the whole thing with, it's just an adrenaline story. Yeah.
So fast.
And it's kind of written like a screenplay in a sense. It's got that script feel to it.
When they bring these books up to you, because you said like Back to the Dirt's in 5 different languages, is that like something you get to pick, like what languages? Or they're like, we think it'll sell best in this region versus this region?
No, basically your publisher has a foreign rights, I always call him a foreign rights dude. And what he does is he shops manuscripts from the publishing house to different editors he knows at the other publishing houses overseas to see if they're interested, Mine, Devin, who's a great guy, he was actually with me when I went to France. That's what everybody's like, who's this? And I'm like, this is my foreign rights dude. Is that okay? He's like, oh yeah, I like that title. That's perfect. I like
foreign
that.
rights dude.
Yeah, Devin's a good guy. But yeah, that's basically what they do. And if they're interested, and a lot of it comes down to that a publishing house overseas might like it, but then because of translation, if it's a really big book, it can be costly because you're going from English to their language.
Right.
And you use a lot of brash words too, a lot of no filter type writing. So I feel like a lot of countries, like, I'm not going to drop any names, China would probably be like, nah, why don't you fuck off with this, dude? They'd be like, dude, did you just call this guy a cocksucker and then shoot him in the mouth? We can't publish that here.
Well, too, when you go through the editing process here in the States, it's somewhere when you do it in another country, because the person who's translating is going to get a hold of you and ask exactly, hey, is this what you meant in this sentence or by this word? What's a better way for me to define this so I can figure it out in my language?
They break it down.
Yeah.
Word.
Yeah. Because they want it to come across as well as it does here,
Yeah, like if you use a direct translation for like cocksucker, and for them that's like goat fucker.
Well, even Southern Indiana.
Yeah,
they don't know where fucking Indiana
is. Where the fuck is that? Right. Yeah, exactly. No. So, but speaking of that story, though, I mentioned it right before the pre-show. I feel like that gives a really good sense because we spoke quite a bit. You showed up really early today. We spoke quite a bit about kind of just who you are. And that story, I feel like really kind of like wraps you up. Does it not? Or
yeah, there's a little bit of me.
There's some ethos in there that kind of align with you.
Yeah.
So me and you, we're gonna start taking notes outside the West Side Walmart, dude. I'm telling you though, let's talk about that for a minute before we get near the end here. But you said you actually did go to the Walmart, the Supercenter, and you were like taking notes and stuff.
Yeah, I went to Walmart in my hometown, and
Kinda
I would
like
actually sit in the parking lot and take notes, and then I'd look at what time the Brinks guy shows up, collects the money, leaves, what the dude looks like, do they pay attention?
Yeah.
And then I'd even talk to him because he'd pulled security at Walmart before to see how things actually line up. How do you get into the money room?
Did they ever?
I looked at where the cameras are at, all that kind of stuff.
Did they ever once stop you like, hey, dude, are you trying to fucking rob us?
No, nobody bothered me.
You were like casing the joint.
Yeah.
You were legitimately casing the joint.
Well, you got to make it realistic.
Yeah, dude. But the story itself is very fast paced and very adrenaline driven. And I feel like, dude, why that's not a full length book, I don't know, dude. I don't know. You got to fix it. Frank, from Brian to Frank.
Okay.
Fix it, dude.
Let's
make this happen.
What piece of advice do you have for somebody that's wanting to get into writing?
Start writing. I mean, that's all you can do. Research it, maybe connect with another writer and pick their brain,
Is there a more challenging task when you're first starting? Like, hey, heads up, this is going to be the hard part when you're first starting.
All of it's hard. Don't think that the first thing you write down and finish is lightning in a bottle, because it's not. It's probably complete and total toilet paper.
Nice.
I mean,
Dookie. Dog poop.
Unfortunately.
Dog
but that's
poop.
what we do. You've got to... Larry Brand always says you have to waste 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pages.
Fucking gross.
And you do. He talked about, he burnt 4 or 5 manuscripts.
That tells me patience. Like, you have a lot of patience. Do you consider yourself a patient person? Do you like to fish? So, like, some of that takes patience.
I haven't been fishing in years either.
I know, but like, it tells me that you're a very patient person.
Oh, you have to be.
So do you think that just has to be an innate ability you have to be a writer? Like, you just need to be a patient person before you start?
Yeah, I had discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. You don't run a marathon your first time out. You may not even finish the damn thing.
Unless you're our buddy...
right.
That we were talking about,
Steve Matthews.
Steve Matthews. Yeah, Steve Matthews ran a marathon like yesterday, I'm sure, like recreationally. That dude's wild.
Just to get the stiffness out of his legs.
4% body fat. The dude is fucking insane.
Wow.
We'll talk more about him after the show. But anyway, so on this journey through becoming a writer, from the moment you started writing in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and then like going on through to even up to today, 2023, has there been like a dark moment where you were real close to just like hanging it up? And then if you did have that dark moment, what helped you persevere through that dark? What was your anchor? What was your rock, your steadfast individual thing, person, religion, whatever? What is that thing that pulled you out of that dark moment?
I've never really thought about hanging it up, but I would, because of all the false starts with Back to the Dirt, because I got busy, we built up, and then I think we built up to around COVID because the Savage came out, because we had the movie, which was between 2017 2018. Then the Savage came out. Then we start. COVID hits. Then we start again. I go off through edits. And then when my mom got dementia and Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's, however you want to pronounce it. But I was fortunate enough that, the thing that pulls you through is writing. You start writing your journal every day, or you're working on the edits every day, and I would obsess over the notes that I had from Jackson and Sean, who are, they're great editors. And it's the writing that kind of helped pull me through that, and exercise. And of course, my wife and my dog, They're non-judgmental. Of course, the dog's always happy to see you, regardless of anything. But
100%.
Yeah.
And your dog doesn't hit you.
no.
My wife hits me. I'm speaking out. I'm asking for help.
Kind of like Californication. Sucker punch right in the face.
Don't take the trash out one more fucking time. I dare you. Like, God damn, I'm sorry. Dude, the getting to know you has been a wild ride, dude. An hour and a half is not long enough to sit down and really encompass who Frank Bill is. But I love that you have two first names.
Yeah, never trust somebody with two first names.
That's fucking sick, dude. I got a blade on me right now. I'm ready, dude. No, I'm joking. No, seriously, I got a blade on me. Just so everybody knows. Nobody get jumpy, okay?
But yeah, all the links to where you can get the book and the audio book will be in the description of the episode.
Yeah, man. You had a couple, for sure you wanted to mention that in August you got something coming up down in Kentucky.
We haven't set a date yet. It's going to be Wes Brown owns Pablo Pizza. I think we're talking about doing it down there. He always does a thing for writers.
It's like a reading, or
he does quarterly readings. He gets some kind of backing through the mafia down there. I'm joking, cornbread mafia. But me and Ashley Irwin, who is, like I was telling you, she's a regional manager for Angels Envy, and she's also written a book called
big fan.
What is it called?
Johnny on the spot. Come on now.
Oh, sorry, Ashley.
Oh no.
But you were also saying shout out to
Grit Black Blood. I'm sorry. Yeah. She's from down at Hazard, and you've got to hear her read. I mean, it's just, she's...
Them Duke boys are at it again.
She's got the voice for every character that she writes about. Just to hear her read, it's like that's how they sound in my head, and she gets the accents and everything down. Awesome. She goes from Southern Kentucky right into a Southern Kentucky Irishman. I mean, it's just...
Is she schizophrenic?
No, she's just a damn good reader and writer.
It's such a
she's
skill.
Really good.
Like those people that can read and like they put an accent on it, and it could be like the first time they're reading it, and you're like, how the fuck did you know to...
Yeah, are you a psychopath?
Right. I'm getting through the word letter by letter, and you're on the next page with...
Yeah, with an accent.
Right.
What about where can people get a hold of you? Where can people get a hold of this? Your brand new book sitting beside you here, Back to the Dirt, that just released about a week ago on May 9th. Where can people get a hold of the book? Where can people find you on social medias and stuff like that?
You can pick the book up anywhere that books are sold. I always say support your local brick and mortar independent bookstores. Of course, you can go on the web too, but I always say that, to support them, because that's what keeps them in business and keeps books afloat, and that's what also supports authors. There's
and also
a lot of
fuck the corporate bookstores. So no, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. No, those guys are great too.
But yeah, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Do you know your do you know your handle on Instagram?
Instagram, I believe it's Frank M. Bill. I think it's Frank
M. Bill on the
Bill.
IG.
Yeah, and then it's just Frank Bill on
That's
on
awesome.
Facebook.
So honestly, dude, it's been a wild ride getting to know you. Honestly, an hour and a half is not long enough. I would love to do another pod with you. You made a long travel to come here. Maybe
anytime.
Maybe next time we come to you or something. We'll figure something out, man. But we got to have you in again. We got to talk more stories. We got to talk more Corden, Indiana. I'm enthralled. I'm so pumped about this. I've been like shaky for like 3 weeks just thinking about getting to know you. So seriously, man, I'm super pumped.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped. Sure. But this has been another thrilling. Oh wait, no, actually, before we outro, do you have any shout outs? Last minute shout outs. Sorry. Without the music, I'm all jacked up today. Do you have any last minute shout outs for sure that you want to say, like, hey, thank you, love you, and then also
I love my wife Jen and my dog Emma, but yeah, thanks out to everybody that supported me over the years. And of course, John McDonald, my editor, Jackson Howard, my editor, Stacia Decker, my agent, and Sherry Smiley, my film agent.
And Rose.
I'm sorry, Rose.
You're crushing it, Rose. You're crushing it. Rose. Yeah. You're one of my favorite publicists I've ever worked with.
Yes.
That's a joke. She's the only.
And Benjamin. I'm sorry. Forgot about Benjamin. Benjamin's my editor's assistant. Benjamin's did a really good job.
And I'm assuming thanks to all the guys and gals that you wrote these characters about.
And my father. Yeah.
Dude,
and
seriously.
all the guys I work with on night shift. All 3 of them.
Shout out to you guys. Crushing
Kirk
it.
and George and Timmy. Used to be Greg Ledford, but he's not on there anymore. So he's on day work. Fucker.
Traitor.
Yeah.
Traitor.
beat his ass.
Oh, fuck, man. It's been a wild ride. Seriously, though, thank you for coming in.
Thanks
you
for having me.
letting us get to know you. And you didn't get to know us at all, but we can talk more after the show. This has been another thrilling episode of the Days Grimm, guys. I can't even tell you how excited I've been about this episode. Fuck. I can't believe it's over. I'm going to tear up a little bit.
Yeah.
My name is Brian Michael Day.
My name is Thomas Grimm.
This has been New York Times bestseller, author of May 9th release, Back to the Dirt, Frank Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hey guys, if you liked what you heard today, there will be a new episode next Tuesday, as well as every Tuesday at 6 a.m. So hit that subscribe button and let your phone do all the work for you.